Now, some of you may be thinking, ah, here he goes again. Look what happened in 2000. He cost poor Al Gore the election. Now, you know what happens to smart people? Smart people, when they start considering the role of third parties and independent candidates, their intelligence level shrinks, till you have to have a magnifying glass to look at it. No matter who they are, PhDs, scientists, and so on. Because we grow up as a prisoner of a 220-year-old two-party dominant electoral college duopoly. And so we look, unlike nature, imagine if nature didn't allow seeds to sprout. Imagine if business didn't allow entrepreneurs to have a chance. If a little company started in the software, would anybody at a news conference say to the little company, are you afraid of taking sales away from Microsoft? In the 19th century, aren't you glad that enough voters split from the Whigs and Democrats and went for the Liberty Anti-Slavery Party or the Women's Right to Vote Party, or after the Civil War, the Labor and Populist Party? Right now, looking back, we sure are, because they put those social justice issues up on the table a lot earlier and built a base much stronger for the two parties to adopt. But it comes here. This is the most amazing thing. This least worst attitude, where you say, look, I hate the Republicans, Democrats are no cup of tea, but they're not as bad as the Republicans, I'm going to vote for the Republicans. If you don't make Democrats, if you don't make demands on the Democratic Party, if you signal to them that your vote can be had and can be taken for granted, guess what? They'll take you for granted. So when the anti-war movement called off the rallies in '04 because they didn't want to embarrass Kerry, who wanted more soldiers in Iraq, and he wouldn't have pulled out of Fallujah. Remember that in the first debate with Bush? They broke the back of the anti-war movement, from which has never recovered in terms of demonstrations. And what did Kerry do? Well, he lost. When you don't make Kerry better, you make him worse. When you don't make your least worst Democrat better, they become blurred, wavering, they don't have the bright line, they don't stand for the people, and they're being pulled 24/7 by the corporate interests in the opposite direction, and successfully so, because you're not pulling in your direction. We've checked 19 groups that supported Kerry, every one of their website, not one of them made a demand on Kerry. Women's rights and consumer, environment, worker, poverty, prison reform, you name it, not one. So you have to think strategically. You've got two options if you think the two parties are failing, like 61% of the American people in a recent Gallup poll. You have two options. You either vote for Nader Gonzalez or another party, denying them the vote, which is the only language they understand, or you organize to pull your least worst in your direction so that least worst is less worse. Otherwise, every 4 years, both get worse. Now look at the political bigotry when they say, well, look at it. You took votes away from Gore in 2000. My answer is, Gore won the election. I've talked to him about this. It was stolen from him by the Republicans before, during, and after the election. From Tallahassee to the politicians' vote, 5-4 in the Supreme Court, which selected Bush and stopped the Florida Supreme Court from finishing the statewide recount. Now, if the election was stolen, that means it was stolen by Republican thieves. Now, why don't these people who are carping about 2000 go after the thieves instead of going after someone they largely disagree with? And because they didn't go after the thieves, they got it in Ohio in 2004. Gore would have won, everything else being the same, if he got Tennessee, or if he got Arkansas, or if 250,000 registered Democrats in Florida didn't vote for Bush. There are all kinds of what-ifs. Why is it that the Green Party is the scapegoat instead of each one of these what-ifs? Gore ran a not good campaign. It was very ambiguous. He should have landslided this bumbling governor from Texas who couldn't put 3 sentences together and had a terrible record. This is political bigotry. You put that together with state ballot access laws, that civil libertarians who will defend neo-Nazis will not defend third parties and independent candidates who are pushed off the ballot. This is political bigotry. This is the Jim Crow version for candidate rights. And if candidate rights don't give you a diversity on the ballot, how much are your voter rights worth? 90% of the House districts, representatives, are slam dunk Republican or Democrat because they gerrymander them and carve them up. You don't even have a voice in two candidates. There's no contest unless you have two. It's not an election, it's an incumbent re-election through coronation. 90%. You remember, those of you who remember the Soviet Union, when they'd have an election, the Kremlin would probably announce that 97% of the people voted? And we'd all laugh, because there's only one candidate per ballot line. Welcome to America. So all I'm asking you is to be as smart as a voter as you are a sports fan. To study the records, study the history, study the strategy, study the tactics, challenge the manager, challenge the plays very knowledgeably. And by the way, sports fans don't give up on their team because they don't think their team's going to win the pennant. And they even give it year. I'm going to, before we have a discussion, I'm going to introduce a great lawyer from Portland, Oregon. He and 3 others, in 15 years of work, initiative, litigation, shut down the Trojan nuclear plant, that giant nuclear plant. No one else. No one else has managed to do that in the United States. SMUD shut down because of the Public Utility District in Sacramento after an advisory referendum. But no one else has done that. You cannot believe the expertise, the diligence, the stamina, the civic personality it takes to come up against a monopoly utility that has all the advantages and take it down. And some of you may remember when it imploded and they got rid of it? It was a spectacular visual. Well, he also represents, with his small firm, he represents citizens who are stomped on by the establishment. You know how hard it is to get a lawyer when you're a citizen stomped on by the establishment? I wish we had more all over the country, like Greg Kafuri. And he's been volunteering for us since 2000. I give you Greg Kafuri.